Welcome back to Anoa Guy Bicycles. This old bike we're reviewing, well, you're looking at the X-Ray shifters. Yes, we're going to do a little disassembly here and give it a good cleaning and reassemble with new cables. First, you got to take it apart. On these X-Rays, you need to pull the caps off by unscrewing those first to release the mechanism on the right one. Well, they all pull off when you totally twist shift it back to release. The cable is crazy because it has to have a loop on the right side. Crazy enough, the left one is different. So we'll keep track of that in a moment here. But looking at the shifter, yeah, here I am taking off the barrel adjuster, taking the cap off for the cable exposure. To replace the cables for either side, you do have to completely disassemble it to get them to come through. The newer versions of the GripShifts do not from SRAM, but this is when GripShift was GripShift themselves. So looking at here, I'm taking off the clamp itself as well because the bolts that mount were rusted. Most of it's plastic with the alloy clamp piece, but unfortunately, of all things, that the bolts need to be taken out and stained a little bit inside there. Hopefully they'll come out in the ultrasonic cleaner. But looking at taking them both apart, keep in mind that both of them, each one of them are a little bit different. So you'll have to make sure you reassemble it properly. You may want to do one of these at a time so you don't get parts mixed up. Like the covers that cover the cable, they're both different. The bolt hole is actually offset. So in any case, since we can finally get it all completely disassembled, I'm taking a little bit of Tri-Flow Superior Lube and a wire brush to clean off as much of the rust as possible. There's 100 different ways of cleaning rust off. That was just my quick way of doing it pre-treating it to put in ultrasonic cleaner. Yep, taking one bolt at a time. Yeah, and with a brush here, it doesn't poke through the gloves, but anyway, you always want to wear gloves to do that. They have a piece in here, it's called the Snoopy nose, which is really kind of funny. We'll review that here. And the grease that you need to put it back together is a little heavier grease. They had a proprietary type grease that was designed just for the GripShift, a little bit stickier and so forth, so you may have to pick that out. I only used a little bit of carb cleaner or brake cleaner on the inside, hopefully not to discolor or change the plastics itself. Here I dip it into the ultrasonic cleaner. Just hot water at 50 degrees Celsius. Other than that, no other cleaning solutions. Because of the age of the shifters being 20 plus old, I don't want to damage them even more so than they have been through real life. So you can see just the dirt exploding off of the parts inside a little strainer so I don't lose those little bits. In addition to, yeah, it's just cleaning all that stuff off. I did able to save the decaling on it, so hey, it didn't come right off with a particular cleaning solution, ultrasonic cleaner. There I'm rotating the parts so it has a different effect. This ultrasonic cleaner has basically 6 speakers underneath, and there you go. We do some hot water rinse to rinse off any extra debris. Usually I do 1 part simple green with 7 parts water, but this one I just want to do straight water to ensure that I don't do any additional damage or discoloring of the actual parts themselves. So here's the dry process. You need to dry all these parts off really good before reassembling because you don't want any moisture still left off inside to be capsulized. It does have more of a water resistant abilities for the internal mechanisms, so hey, got to make sure you gotta keep it dry. So I hand dried everything and let it dry. But if you're in a humid area, just throw a fan on it. Just make sure it's completely, all those water droplets are gone. So far what I've used is just hot water, a little bit of carb or brake cleaner, and a little bit of elbow grease to take everything apart. So here I am wiping everything off inside and out on the grips, covers, bolts, what have you. This particular parts, they've got to be at least almost 30 years old. When GripShift came out, they had their own little seminars, and they were pretty much of a game changer back in the 90s due to the fact that Shimano was pretty much controlling everything as in the shifter market. And there's that Snoopy nose right there. I'm trying to clean out the old Snoopy nose grease, which was a white paste type, like almost like toothpaste, but don't use toothpaste. I have something that's going to be better. Oh, look at there. There's my secret sauce, the ceramic coating for ceramic slam from lithium. What this is going to do is actually give it not just a shine, is water repellent and also UV protection. So you can see I'm just kind of just drowning every part that I can with it just to make sure I have that added protection. Hey, why not? You know, and any kind of water prevention barrier on these is going to make these shifters last longer. They've lasted 30 years now, so I'm going to try to give it another 30 years of life and functionality. The predecessor to the X-Rays were basically a clear version. Those actually cracked pretty bad. So this was the updated version back in the 90s where it actually held up a little bit longer. And I take a little bit of Armor All tire treatment and put it on the actual grips themselves. They're actually still in really good shape for being so old. They're not discovered or worn down or anything. So pretty good find here, other than just a little bit of rust on those bolts. There you go. It's all dried off, ready to go, put it for reassembly. So I used Triflow Superior Lube. There's a little guide for the cable. Pulled that out, which I didn't show earlier, but hey, you know, can't catch everything. And then put a little light grease on there. Then I'm trying to figure out which actual grip goes with which. That's a right and a left. X-ray faces forward, so if you're about ready to run over somebody, they can see the X-ray. This one I'm using the Ceram kind of a shock thick grease. It's kind of like slick honey, if you will. Thicker kind of grease, not a bearing grease. You don't want to put that in there, but you want to put something a little bit in between, right? So the Snoopy nose goes in. There's going to be a notch where the backside fits in. You will know if you put it in backwards. Those are not proprietary to right or left. They're just a Snoopy nose. And here goes the cable. On the actual right shifter, the 8-speed goes through the casing of the shifter. The left side goes through the actual grip twisty part. And you'll see that here in a moment. This has what they call the loop, which you got to loop it in a counter or clockwise position when you're looking at it from the side to pull it through. Here I'm going to have several attempts to try to get this damn thing locked into place because it is a little bit tricky. You have to kind of guide it over the actual ramp, and then I put a little bit of light lube just to give it a water barrier for an also better performance. And then you just kind of try to snap it in place. And at the full extension, I believe, when you twist it forward, that'll kind of lock into place, but it takes a couple attempts to get that Snoopy nose to lie in there correctly. These were always a pain in the ass back in the day to get this set in, but once I get them to click into place, and you hear it ratchet, then you're like, okay, that's fitting in there pretty good. So I'm about ready to get it to fill in its spots, and the cable goes over the guide. There we go. There we got the snap. Okay. Then you can proceed to put the cover back on. And remember, the two different ones, so one's going to be offset, one's going to line up, so you put the Phillips screw. So basically you just need a Phillips screwdriver to take these things apart. And then you double check it, and while the cable's still there, this is a brand new stainless steel cable I put on there too, just by the way. Oh, and here's the clamp portion. I want to put a little bit of grease in there to make sure there's any debris in there, it doesn't get in there, kind of waterproof barrier. There's this little micro washer thing where I'm using as a pick to set in there. I couldn't get it to press in by the pick, so I decided to put the bolt in, which will line it up with the actual hole itself. If this gets compromised, this actually protects the plastics from actually cracking when you're compressing it, so it's a very important piece. Small parts make all the difference, right? So I went slowly and gently to when it compressed in to make sure it compressed in correctly, but here we go. And we're going to be using this at a later date, so you definitely want to coil up your cable so you don't end up kinking it, laying it around, or stepping on it, or what have you. Okay, onto the left shifter. This is a 3-speed. Put a little bit of light Triflow on there, Superior Lube. Got that little guide that fits inside. And then I'm going to put the, well, it was Snoopy grease, which is basically the ceramic or Ceram shock grease in there. Using a little pick to place it in there, give it a good coating. In this way, more is better. And then I noticed I got a cable around my neck here, so you slide it through the actual grip portion of the shifter. And if you notice something is not quite right, well, you can actually get it in the wrong slot. So you want to make sure that you line that cable in, because there's like a gap on the right side of the actual hole. So get her in there correctly, and then that actual head of the cable will fit flush inside. This one's a little bit easier to set in because you just do a direct line. You don't have to do the whole loopy, which I'm like trying to figure out here, like, because it's been, what, 30 years since the last time I worked on one. And then, it's like, oh yeah, it goes direct. This is more similar to the newer versions where I don't believe you have to disassemble the shifter to actually replace the cable. The reason why I use new cables is because they actually are soldered on the end as a hard lead, so it actually fits in there and guides through without fraying. Okay, got it snapped in, putting the cover back on there, give it a good tighten down. To over tighten it because you'll crack that plastic, and double check it, make sure it runs smooth. And now I'm going to put that clamp portion again. So this one's a little different one, and oddly enough, this one's discolored from sun, so wherever this bike's been sitting outside, well, in any case, then we got the bolt back in there. Gonna just not mess with it, just use the actual bolt to line up that shim to make sure it doesn't crack that plastic. And I kind of test it, make sure it compresses a little bit, not all the way. You want to be light and polite on parts of this vintage. There you go, the X-Ray shifter, smoked. It's been smoked. There we go, we're ready to go. Going to cable that up, save it for a later time. We're going to be doing install into the bike later. But there you go, there's your disassemble, cleaning, and reassembling with new cables for the classic X-Rays from the 90s from GripShift. Have a great day. Thank you for hanging out with me in the garage. Until next time, if it's nice in your neighborhood, go for a ride. Well, that concludes this episode of This Old Bike. Thank you for tuning in and watching through the final reveal of the perfect bike for you. Maybe, maybe not. But in any case, I hope you learned some things along the way in the journey of a bike mechanic refurbishing these particular beautiful gems of the past, which are very relevant of today. Thanks for tuning in, and you will find other videos like these. Go ahead and click here to enjoy more refurbished, detailed bikes that are from the past.